For 4 years, I know it.
Oh, nice. Where do you live? Where did you stay?
I lived in Oxford for 2 years because I went there for
Okay,
grad school, and then London for 2 years after.
cool. Nice. Well, nice. Yeah, nice. Yeah.
So
All right. We're now live to YouTube.
dope.
See people filling in. Hi, everyone. We'll give it a few more seconds. Let people join.
Do you make it out to London a lot, Stephen?
Yeah. I do go to London a lot. I mean, like my publisher is based in London, so
Yeah.
like my publicist is there, and
Yeah.
I mean, I was in London actually a week ago. I went to do an interview with the BBC and all. Yeah, so just really nice. I mean, being the broadcasting house in London, and yeah. So I do go almost perhaps at least once in 2 weeks or so. Yeah. So
Yeah.
and it's not too far away from here, anyways, in Norwich. So it's like a 2 hour train journey, to London.
Yeah. Cool.
It looks like we got some more people in, so I'll go ahead and get started. Hi, everyone. I'm Elisa. I'm the events coordinator at the bookstore at PMP, and I would like to welcome you to PMP Live. Thank you for joining us in this virtual format today. If you're in the US, this earlier format, which I'm really excited about. Stephen is probably going to get out of this and go to dinner, but some of us will be having lunch, so that's exciting. At any point during the event, you can click on the link in the chat to purchase the 5 Sorrowful Mysteries of Andy Africa on the Politics and Prose website. And additionally, you can ask Stephen any questions by clicking on the Q&A button, which should be found at the bottom of your Zoom screen. We're also providing closed captions if you click on the CC link, which should be next to the Q&A box, also at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And finally, we want to thank you for being here with us today. We're so thankful to our family of loyal customers for keeping our spirits and our business afloat. And now I would like to welcome to PNP Live, Stephen Buoro, celebrating the release of his book, The 5 Sorrowful Mysteries of Andy Africa. Stephen was born in Nigeria in 1993. He has received a degree in mathematics and a master's in creative writing from the University of East Anglia as the recipient of the Booker Prize Foundation Scholarship. He's also received the Deborah Rogers Foundation Award and now lives in Norwich, United Kingdom. Buoro will be in conversation with Tope Folarin. Tope is a Nigerian-American writer based in Washington, D.C. He serves as the director of the Institute for Policy Studies and the Lannan Visiting Lecturer in Creative Writing at Georgetown. He's the recipient of the Caine Prize for African Writing, the Whiting Award for Fiction, and a fellowship from the National Endowment for the Arts, among other awards. Tope also serves as a board member of the Avalon Theater in D.C., the vice president of the board of the Penn Faulkner Foundation, and as a member of the President's Council of Pathfinder. He was educated at Morehouse College and the University of Oxford, where he earned 2 master's degrees as a Rhodes Scholar. His debut novel, A Particular Kind of Black Man, was published by Simon & Schuster. So now, without further ado, please welcome Stephen Buoro and Tope Folarin to PMP Live.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Yeah.
Stephen, such a pleasure to meet you and to read your fantastic book. Congratulations to you on your accomplishment. I know I'm really eager to start our conversation, but I know you wanted to read a bit from your novel before we begin our conversation.
Yes, thank you so much, Tope. I mean, it's such a pleasure to be in conversation with you, and I would like to thank you for being here with me today.
Absolutely.
First of all, thanks to everyone for joining. Thank you, everyone, for joining this conversation, and I also like to thank the Politics and Prose bookstore for hosting this event. Yeah, so I'm going to read a bit, like a 2 minutes and 10 seconds, hopefully, extracts from my novel. So my novel, The 5 Sorrowful Mysteries of Andy Africa, it's about Andy Aziza. His nickname is Andy Africa. So Andy is a 15-year-old Nigerian boy. He lives in northern Nigeria with his mother. So Andy is 15, as I said. He is obsessed with blonde women, blondes, with whiteness, the West, and as well as who his true father is. And he's, of course, a smart and funny 15-year-old boy. He's also interested in mathematics, Afrofuturism, and all that. But he has a very complicated relationship with his mother. I mean, she's poor, she's uneducated, and she's a photographer anyway. And so the novel is about how Andy's feelings of shame and obsession become intensified when his life is suddenly destabilized by communal violence. So I'm going to read from the opening of the novel. And in this extract that I'm going to read, Andy reflects on his obsession for whiteness, for blonde women. And he just reflects on all that, whatever. So here I go. Dear white people, I love white girls, especially blondes. Blondes who wear their hair in ponytails and once a week in pigtails. Is this a fetish? I don't know. I'm just pretty sure I'll marry a white girl, a blonde. Do I think black girls are ugly? Of course not. That will mean Mama is ugly. And I'm not going to take that shit from anybody. In fact, I haven't seen a blonde before because this is Africa and there are minus 0.001 blondes here. Still, I love blondes. Each strand of hair like a long, sweet sun. Hair like ripples of water chasing each other. I swear I can see my face reflected clearly on each strand. I go to bed hungry most nights. I sleep on my dead mat in our dead living room with dead electricity. And with my last energies, I reach into my shorts and think about blondes. And peace flows down my heart to my stomach and down to my feet. And I'm filled. And I sleep satisfied, like a boy who's eaten a dozen cheeseburgers, though I don't know the taste of that shit. And I sleep knowing the future is mine. A 15-year-old African genius poet author boy who loves blondes is not a criminal, not a racist, not a sellout, but a sweet, cool, beautiful African boy. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that reading. And I love the fact that you read that because I think it introduces us in a really wonderful and insightful way to this incredible character. Can I start by asking about how you developed this voice, this literary voice? Did it come to you immediately? Is this something you developed over time?
Yeah, regarding the voice of Andy, my protagonist, and my narrator too, it just came to me, I think unconsciously, like it just came to me so suddenly one day. I was sitting in my living room in Nigeria, and this was in June 2018. So I was sitting down and I was in this creative state. I just wanted to write a novel. I just wanted to do something in my life anyway. Yeah, that was after after I had graduated from university. I studied mathematics, right? So, but I just wanted to do something meaningful anyway. So I was just in that state and all, and then this evening in June 2018, this voice just comes to me, this powerful voice. It just ripped something inside me, right? The voice had so much power about it, so much shame, so much guilt, angst to it, let's say, and it also had this aspect of it, like it just wanted to confess so many things, like to confess, let's say, some repressed thoughts, And then I had a BlackBerry with me then, and I often used for writing. So I just grabbed that BlackBerry and I began typing in a crazy frenzy, just typing and typing and typing and typing. And then so I wrote around 500 words, and after like typing, so I decided to like take a look at what I had written, right? So I began to reread what I had written, and I realized that it was like the most powerful piece of writing, like the most eviscerating piece of writing I had composed up to that time in my life. And that passage that I wrote on my BlackBerry became the opening of my novel, became this extract I just read. From that part, yeah. Yeah, we just need to change this, I would say. Yeah. But since then, of course, I made the book, the subsequent narrative, because after writing that extract, that passage, I spent some weeks like developing the story, and then I wrote a very quick first draft of the novel in 2018. I spent about 2.5 weeks with that same BlackBerry. I was just typing and typing morning, afternoon, night. I kept my other phone. I turned off my other phone that I used for keeping in touch with the world, and I was just typing and typing. So I composed a first draft and all, and so, but since then the book has gone through, as you would imagine, so many iterations, so many changes. But that extract that I wrote, that passage that I wrote originally on my BlackBerry, I mean, has been mostly intact, I would say.
Yeah. That's what a story about about creative inspiration, about following your muse when it strikes, about being committed to the process. I hope you don't mind if I probe that story just a little bit. I'm intrigued by the fact that you did your undergraduate degree in mathematics, and then you find your way into the world of creative writing. Have you always been a writer? Has that always been a part of who you are? Is that something you discovered while you were studying in school?
Yeah, I've always been a writer, actually. I say, right? I've always been a writer. I think before I talk about the first piece of writing I did, I'll talk about, let's say, a little bit about my background, right?
Yeah.
So I grew up in northern Nigeria. My parents are from southern Nigeria, but I grew up in northern Nigeria. I was born in southern Nigeria, whatever. I grew up in northern Nigeria, and my parents only had very basic education, right? We were like from a very working class Nigerian family, you know. And so there were like no books at home. There were just the Bible and some religious texts like that, right, at home. But still, like my mother is this very, very like creative person. He's very very literary person. And even though she didn't have the life opportunities, the education opportunities I went on to get in life. She nurtured me with language, right? I mean, she's so witty, she's so funny. I mean, the way she uses language, wordplay, and all that, it's so fascinating. And of course, I was raised in a Catholic family, so and I'll go to mass and I would hear all the prayers. I was an altar boy too, and we would read from the priest would read from sacramentary, we read from all these religious texts and all these prayers, and they were so poetic, and I always wondered, who composed all those pieces of writing? Like, where did they come from? And so that love for the written word has always been with me since when I was very little. And so I would just cut the whole story short, and then I went to missionary school. I started reading books. Yeah, and I found books and started reading literary text. Yeah, and then so my writing journey formally began, I would say, right in 2005, a few months after my father had died. And I was just sitting outside my house, with a piece of paper and pencil. I had finished completing my assignment. So I just found myself writing a story, right? I mean, a story about the war in Animal Kingdom and all. So from there, that love for writing began, and I kept nurturing it throughout my life. But after secondary school, I was wondering, like, what the hell, would I do with my life? I didn't want to become a doctor or a lawyer, all this kind of stuff that we're being expected to become, right, in Nigeria.
Yeah.
So I in secondary school, I fell in love with mathematics. I had this wonderful math teacher who made me to recognize the beauty, the transcendence, the power, just the addiction, whatever, of mathematics, should I say, and I loved it, and I decided to study mathematics, right, at university. But even while studying mathematics, that love for writing, that's love for the written word. I mean, many things will not make me cry, but a sentence, like a beautiful sentence, the powerful sentence, can just can just break me, can just shatter me, right? And so I've always just loved writing, loved the written word, and yeah.
Yeah. You're writing at this incredibly interesting moment, I think, in terms of African literature. And I say this when I was coming up. So, for example, when I was in college, there weren't many novels by African writers that were sort of published and circulating. I remember the first time I read Nervous Conditions when I was a sophomore in college, and how it rocked me, because for the first time I was encountering ideas and even people that my parents and family members and other friends had told me about, but I'd never seen in literature. And I remember that moment later when Purple Hibiscus was published by Chimamanda Adichie, and how sort of earth-shattering that was, because again, it was the first emergence of a kind of African talent in quite some time. Here we are now in 2023. It seems that every quarter, at least 4, 5, 6 books by African writers are published. African writers have established themselves on the world literature stage as tremendous talents and thinkers and artists. How has this new emerging work impacted your sense of yourself as a writer and your work as well?
Yeah, it's really wonderful. I mean, to see, like, I mean, new books, like, as I said, almost every quarter, or I mean, every few months, and then like a new novel, I mean, it's been published from our part of the world, from Nigeria, for example, and like, I mean, published hugely, like internationally, and many people get to read, to benefit, to see like a different part of the world. And it's really wonderful. And it's just a perfect time, I think, to be like a writer in a way, because in a way, like, I mean, you know, you're not just writing for yourself, but your book is also in conversation, like with other books, being produced at the same time. And that many Nigerian writers who are like my age, or even younger than me, who are writing many amazing stuff. And it's just wonderful to be part of that community.
Yeah. Do you see yourself, just to follow up on that, do you see yourself writing in a particular tradition? Or is this just, you know, I'm Stephen, this is what I want to put out into the world?
I don't know. I'm just forever. Like, I mean, writing this book, like, I mean, if you had told me like 5, 6 years ago that I would write a book like this, I would have told you that you're a massive liar. Like, you're just like, you're just lying to me. Like, nah, it can't be possible. But whatever, I mean, as a writer, you go to your table with whatever comes to you and whatever speaks so strongly to you at that time, and then you put it down and all. And I don't know. I'm just writing whatever interests me, and whatever I mean, things I feel maybe they're not, I mean, talk about, right? Like some of the topics I reflect on in this, the themes I reflect on in this novel, the themes of like xenocentrism, that desire for otherness, or that craving for Western identity, you know. So I mean, it strongly resonated with me, and I think many Nigerians too. Like, this is what we're currently going through. I mean, we're in this crazy post-colonial like melting pot. Like, so many things are happening, and we end up desiring the West and desiring Western ideals, Western systems of being, you know. And I just wanted to like interrogate all that stuff like in my novel. So I don't know. I'm just writing. We'll see. Like, I think with my subsequent work, so we'll see how my subsequent work and how they connect with these, and we'll see. Anyway, we'll see.
Yeah. So you read that really interesting, incisive kind of the opening part of your novel, where we're introduced to Andy, his incredibly sort of malleable and intelligent voice. And he opens by addressing white people, right? Like the first 3 words of your novel, dear white people. So it's a really audacious thing to do, Stephen, to kind of take that on at the very beginning of your book, to kind of address white people. So I wanted to ask a couple of questions about that. First of all, what are you trying to say about whiteness in this novel?
In this novel now, I like some of the topics I'm interrogating like the legacy of colonialism, right?
Sure.
The collapse of the Nigerian state, and how like these factors bring about that desire for otherness, for whiteness, okay, for the West, you know. I'm looking, so in this novel, I'm looking at that huge inundation of Western culture and Western systems of being, and Western ideals, like in Nigeria, and like many young people who are growing up in contemporary Nigeria, and not just contemporary Nigeria, even in many other African societies, like they're just being fed so much about, about the West. And in fact, the legacy of colonialism has caused this huge crisis of self, whereby many young people, like my character, and their selves have been like split, bifurcated into like two different halves. One half is like the African self, the African self that colonialism has made them to become ashamed of and to want to reject. And then this Western self, this white self that have infected them as the perfect ways of being, the perfect systems, the ideals and all that. And so I'm trying to interrogate all these aspects of whiteness wherever in my society, and of course, like how that also manifests in religion, for example, in Christianity in Nigeria. Like I grew up having all these white priests, even white nuns around me, and then like being me to want to desire them, to want to be like them or to emulate them and all that. And so like I'm just trying to interrogate all this stuff like in my novel.
Yeah. I guess related to that, I wanted to ask you about your sense of the audience for this book, because you start by addressing white people. So is this a book that's directed towards white people, or do you have a different sense of audience? I mean, if you're like most writers who say, I want everybody in the world to read this book and, buy it, and I get that. But I wonder how you were thinking about audience as you were writing this.
Yeah, for me, I see myself as a post-colonial writer, right? And everything I write. So I write everything I write is, of course, I mean, for my compatriots to also look at and to see themselves in it. And but especially like in this novel, the introduction is meant to like speak back to the colonizers, to these Western people and all. Like in my novel, the novel is sets is it's I don't know, it's delineated in a form of like a confession, right? I come from a Catholic background, and confession is this pivotal aspect of Catholic belief and Catholic teaching and all. And so because when you confess, you admit you admit guilt, right? And confession also has other aspects of like come to terms with the evils or the negative things if you've dealt with or whatever, or that you're dealing with, and it also shows like vulnerability to confession. And so like Andy is speaking back, and I said, speaking back to these colonizers, these people who have made him who he is, right? Who have infused in him this idea, this craving for whiteness, for otherness. And when I'm talking about colonizers, I don't just mean the British people. I also mean like even Americans themselves. Because in Nigeria, there's so much of American culture, like being forced onto young people. Like Hollywood, for example, Hollywood movies are so powerful. I mean, I grew up as a little boy wanting to be like those superheroes. I mean, there were no, like, I couldn't see any black superhero in those American movies. So, I mean, there were nobody for me to there was like no mentors there for me in a way. And they were all, of course, white characters. And even in terms of like the right kind of actors, the people who were meant to desire, like the actresses, they're all like white women, white, slim, blonde, tall, like women, and this has been packaged by Hollywood and sold to us as a standard, as what we should desire, as what we should want, and for us to be ashamed of our own selves and of our own ideals, of our own heritage and all that. So I'm just trying to interrogate that by like making a direct address to the West and all. And
I'm also interested in, and I suppose maybe this is something of a nerdy question as one writer to another writer, but you incorporate what appears to me to be like poetry throughout the text. You'll be scanning the prose, and then it breaks into poetry, or sort of poetry-like sort of sections of text, and then it goes back into prose. I'm wondering about why you did that as a kind of sort of structural thing. What are you a poet? Are you attracted to poetry? Is just another way of rendering voice?
Yeah, I love poetry, right? And as a teenager, I wrote lots and lots of poetry. I found poetry and even mathematics too as these systems for me to like air my emotions, to like spray paint my angst, my anger. I mean, to deal with the whole experience of coming of age, you know. And while writing this book, I realized that just as how poetry was hugely pivotal and very helpful to me and very therapeutic and all that in my coming of age. That also my narrator, Andy, who is also like 15, who's 15, you know, that poetry would also like, he would also find poetry very useful, like in unraveling himself and for the reader, like in come to terms with all this, the turbulence that he deals with, the chaotic situations in his country, in his community, and all, chaotic experiences and all that. Um, and structurally too, I found that many times that while writing, that prose often sometimes felt so insufficient, inefficient in my prodding or my depicting like my characters, my narrators complications, his emotions. Like it just felt it wasn't prodding, it wasn't piercing the themes, the ideas that I wanted to convey as much as I would like. But poetry, in its beauty, in its concise nature, and I mean, I found it so opposite, so powerful, and so I mean, poetry is so powerful, and it just made sense to just include that, of course, without trying to bored reader or without making it so off-putting or whatever. Like it's just very um, tender, slim, like poetry. I mean, poetry in the tradition of like Charles Simic, you know. I mean, I love his poetry so much, and yeah, that was what I was trying to do anyway. And I
Poetry
think
of
it
who?
makes
Of Charles.
Charles Simic, yeah,
Oh, yeah, Simic.
the American
Yeah,
poet, yeah,
who just
yeah, yeah,
passed away
yeah,
um,
yeah, yeah,
a
yeah,
few months ago. He, for me, is a touch point as well. I
yeah,
remember reading The World Doesn't End, which came out in
yeah,
'89, won the Pulitzer, I believe, in '90, and it's a
yeah,
sort of, I think, his magnum opus, a tremendous work of art.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. His
wonderful
poetry is
book.
really wonderful. Yeah, yeah. So I just found all that like I just needed to bring that off also to show Andy's because Andy is a very creative boy. I mean, despite yeah, he's very creative, he's very fun, he's funny, you know, to bring out some of these other aspects of himself, yeah, for the reader, you
Yeah.
know.
I wanted to ask you a question about this kind of force that appears in your book. It's called HXVX. It's kind of, and as I was thinking about this a couple of days ago and writing these questions, I was trying to describe it in the question, but I thought maybe it's better if you describe this kind of all powerful, it seems omniscient force, but that's also like
Yeah.
closely associated with the West and whiteness. So could you tell us a bit about this force, this HXVX, and how it plays, the role it plays in your novel?
Yeah, so like my narrator Andy, as I said, is a very like creative boy, right? So like he even before talking about him, so I'll also talk about myself too. I'll put a pin on that and talk about myself a little bit. So like when I was like at this age, when I was young, you know, growing up in Nigeria, there's so many complications of Nigeria, so many complications of the whole post-colonial experience that you wonder, oh, whether there's something, maybe a supernatural force somewhere, and that is actually causing the many problems that my country, Nigeria, and many other countries like experience and go through, right? Um, and of course, yeah, and whether this force is actually like supernatural, right? Like it's all powerful, whatever. And whatever I used to think about that at the time, I know. And I'm coming to Andy, like Andy thinks or Andy claims whatever that, oh, perhaps that the problems the continent is experiencing, it's that it might be caused by like something perhaps almost supernatural, right? Like a very supernatural and all powerful being, like an omniscient force, I mean, an omniscient person, being or whatever. And so Andy decides to create this idea called HXVX. And so this HXVX is formed from the Hebrew name for God, like in the Old Testament. That's YHWH. Um, So Andy calls HXVX calls it like the curse of Africa, right? Andy calls it like it's like a grammatical like expression or like a shorthand for the curse of Africa. So Andy creates is using HXVX to create like to conflict all these huge problems that have befallen the continent in many ways. For example, issues like or negative problems like, for example, like slavery, colonialism, dictatorship, plutocracy, kleptocracy. So he combines all of them like as like a huge monolithic formula subsumes them under like HSVX. And in a way, because the book is in a way a superhero narrative. Like Andy often sees himself as a superhero whose destiny it is to save the continent, to solve all the problems that his country undergoes, right? He sees himself as a superhero. So like, and since he's a superhero, like he's a super villain whom he's supposed to like defeat is HXVX. So he's the superhero, and his destiny is to defeat HXVX. And but I found the theory actually very fascinating because I think when we in our day-to-day lives, we often face so many problems, and one of the great ways of dealing with those problems is to try in our own way, the best way we can, to understand those problems, to give a face to it and to give a name, whatever, to those problems, no matter how fleeting they might seem. And I think that's what Andy does with the idea of HXVX. Andy uses it to explain the chaos of his post-colonial experience and the difficulties and he experiences and all that, and also creates someone to blame for his obsessions for like whiteness, the West and all that. Yeah.
No, thank you for that explanation. It's a really powerful kind of way of capturing the sort of seemingly massive and impossible to describe force that plays such an active role in all our lives, and especially the lives of those who are marginalized and oppressed. It does seem like there's some kind of active force that is determining so much about our lives. And you played that concept, I think, plays really well in your book as well. In a moment, I'm going to transition to audience Q&As. We've already received a couple great questions, and I encourage those of you who are in the audience to ask any questions that come to mind. Before turning to audience questions, I wanted to ask you about, so the thing that was apparent to me as I was reading this book is that Andy, and I suspect you, are drawn to all kinds of media. We live in a truly media-saturated environment. There's so many ways of accessing stories and narratives. There's video games, there's television, there's film, there's social media, there's novels. Why are you drawn to the novel as a means of communicating emotion and idea? What is it about the novel that is still important at this moment in our history?
I don't know. I love the novel form, right? I grew up reading novels, and I mean, some of the novels I read, I mean, have like used to have, I guess, a film adaptations or TV adaptations. And then let's say I would read the novel and then watch the adaptation and just see that the adaptation is actually like just a facet of the story, or just like a part of it and not the main thing. I mean, the psychology of the characters, the world views of, I mean, like the whole experience of just being with them, like it just usually feels like lost to me, like in those adaptations. And so for me, I found the novel form like really powerful, and I find it that it's perhaps even a bit, should I say, omnipotent in a way. I mean, because a novel can do so many things. Like you can have like so many genres, like at play together, like whatever, mixed, whatever, in the same conversation. You can have like my novel, you can have so many ideas. I mean, sitting together, being in the conversation with each other. There are some ideas that might seem to be opposing and all. Like you can have so many dialectic, whatever, like in a novel. Like it just, I don't know, the novel is just so powerful, and I really love the novel form. And and I hope to continue writing like many more novels, hopefully. Yeah.
Yeah. Amen, brother. I'm with you. I will switch over to audience questions now. There's a great question from John Paul Justin Amen. John Paul says, it seems a complex mapping of the experience of the other God, of being othered by culture. I said in describing your work, I'll say that again. It seems a complex mapping of the experience of being othered by culture. Where does the title fit in the complexity? Jesus triumphed over violence in the sorrowful mysteries. Does Andy triumph over violence?
What a question. Anyway, so I'll talk about the title a bit. So when I began writing the novel, when I was like maybe a third into the very first draft I wrote, so I realized that the trajectory of the story and of the life of my protagonist was strongly mirroring this prayer. This prayer I grew up saying, my family, Nigeria, and all. Yeah. Yeah, and because this prayer, the five sorrowful mysteries, the prayer of the Rosary, which is said in the Catholic Church, and it reflects on like the final moment of Jesus' life. And before he dies, from the agony in the garden, the scourging of the pillar, the carrying with thorns, carrying of the cross, crucifixion, and death, and all. So, and I found that the life of my character, my narrator, whatever, strongly mirrors this prayer. And while writing the novel, so some of the like intertextualizations, because I love intertextuality, how texts reference each other, speak to each other, borrow from each other, and all that, whatever. A number of intertextual references in the novel. Whatever, I found that that's the novel, that's the prayer, whatever, that the title not just mirrors and this life, but the life of so many people right, in my community that I grew up knowing. I mean, a life of so much struggle, so much pain. And for me, I see that through that pain and through that struggle, I see like a transcendence coming through. Like, yeah, and I feel because like my country, Nigeria, it's a country that I mean still that continues to undergo the whole legacy of colonialism. I mean the violence and the chaos and all the turbulence. And we need to undergo that process for us to become a nation, for us to like discover our identity, who we are as Nigerians, what Nigerianness is all about. To go into the nation that we will become, whatever, a great nation that hopefully we are going to become. And then, but we need to go through the whole sorrowful mysteries, the whole struggle, the whole turbulence, which is sad, whatever. Yeah, and and I feel the title, of course, is very powerful. And I also feel it's a bit deceptive too, because I mean, I think there's a lot of like laughter and hilarity like in the novel too. And I mean, it's about this 15-year-old boy and his friends and all, and that whole journey. And I think readers who read the book, I think they're going to also develop their own like personal interpretations of the title, which might even be much more powerful than my own personal interpretation or conceptualization of it, right? Yeah. But in the end, like I think what I want readers to realize, to get from the title, is to realize that I mean the title is like a literary prayer. I mean the title makes the novel, not just the title, but the structuration of the novel follows the title, right? So like so the book in the end is meant to be like a literary prayer for not just Andy, but for his community, his country, and his continent. Yeah.
Well said. Well said. The next question is from Doralee Brooks. Doralee says, were you ever concerned about how people outside of the Nigerian or African culture might experience the book? Were you ever concerned about accessibility?
Yeah, I wasn't really like thinking about all that, right, while writing the book, because I think if I became bothered with that, right, I don't know, I don't think I would have written the book, right? I would have to be like, oh, like what's the point of writing the novel and all? I don't know. I just read the story. For me, a story that I felt I related strongly to, and when writing the novel, I know, of course, like I'm talking about many difficult, complicated issues in the novel, like issues that pertain to my community, my country, right? And so, but what I wanted to do was to try to, I mean, to depict, I mean, these whole complications, these situations, like in a very like engaging way, like in a way that, of course, for me, like I want to be engaged, like because I'm going to spend so many years writing a novel, right? So I ensured, like, I made sure like the story, of course, I mean, was engaging to me. I mean, I thought it was engaging to me anyway, and but to try to make it as engaging as I could, and to make the story as simple and approachable as possible. So I don't know, like I never bothered about that, but I just whatever. I think I did the very best I could to convey what I wanted to convey in the novel. I know, yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot about this question. It's funny. I was for a time in my own writing life obsessed with this question. I wrote an essay for the Los Angeles Review of Books a few years ago called Against Accessibility, where I try to argue that African writers who aren't from America, more or less, shouldn't be concerned at all about accessibilities because, you know, I came up reading books by people in the West, people from America and the UK, who described things I had never seen before. You know, I remember quite vividly looking up, you know, sort of words I encountered for the first time in these books, which is to say these writers are writing from their experience. And they didn't say to themselves, well, there might be somebody from Nigeria who doesn't understand what I'm saying, so let me like define this. And it does seem sometimes that there's a burden on African writers, South American writers, writers from Asia to kind of define every part of the experience in a way that other writers haven't done or don't feel any pressure to do. So I'm glad that you kind of wrote it as genuinely as you could, and that it came from a place of authenticity. I'm wondering, as an aside, if you, and again, this is another kind of nerdy, writerly question, but as you begin to think about the book's journey into the world, if accessibility is something that comes up for you in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, yeah, of course. So like in the process of revision, of course, right? I mean, my editors, I know, are there, and of course, and they begin to make me think about the reader more and more. Like whatever I do, like what does the reader think, or how would you help the reader anyway? I mean, without trying to help them too much anyway. But I don't know. So I just wrote the story. My main target, of course, my main intention was to try as best as I could. I mean, to use all the stylistic elements in the novel. I mean, the story is told in a first person present tense, right? It's a first person present tense narrative. So to employ all these stylistic elements, to do the very best as I could to put the reader in position that Andy is. Like, I mean, for the reader to see things Andy sees, to feel what he feels, to taste what Andy takes, and all that. That whole experience of actually growing up in northern Nigeria, a place that's not often written about, and yeah, but to just give that reader their experience and also the very best I could, and yeah, and I think I don't know, and so that's what I try to do, and in the end, I mean, now the book has been published, and it's now it's not the reader's property, the property of the readers, for the readers to interpret, yeah, however they feel like. But I think for me, like the many times I've read it, I know I felt the book was accessible enough for me, and perhaps for my 13-year-old self, because with everything I write, I think of that self, who I was when I was 13. Because at that age, that was when I read so much when I was a 13-year-old boy. I read so much. Yeah. I mean, I read encyclopedias. I read anything, everything. I read so much. And I always think about that self, perhaps. If there's any internal that I often think about, is that boy. Like, what would he think? Would he think that I'm just trying to make things too complicated, or would he think that I'm trying to dump things too much? Like, what would he think here? Yeah, that was just what I was thinking.
Yeah, and I think there's so much about the book that's accessible because it's also about U.S. soft power, right? U.S. cultural power.
Yeah.
Andy is constantly interacting with cultural products from the West, specifically from America, right? And so it's also a statement of how this culture that we've exported, we being America, you know, because I'm in America right now, has impacted the world and the way people around the world see themselves. And so, I think too about your book and dialogue with other, I mean, because the great thing about this moment is that there are a number of incredible writers who are emerging from northern Nigeria. There's Abubakar Ibrahim, there's El Nathan John, there's Arinze, who just dropped wonderful short story collection last year from Catapult here in this country that's done really well. And so it's just a wonderful moment when now there are a number of folks from northern Nigeria, which is, to your point, been historically neglected. A lot of the books that we were getting were from the South. I think it's also becoming more accessible because there are more writers from that part of the world who are producing work.
And our books are just all in conversation with each other, right? And still it's still not sufficient. It's completely not sufficient at all.
Oh, absolutely not by any stretch.
Like in northern Nigeria, I mean, we're talking about, a place, a part of my country that is about 100 million, in fact more than 100 million people, and there are just a handful of writers who have been published from the region, and it's a bit sad. It's really, really sad. It's not a bit, it's really, really sad, and more should be done. And I mean, more should be done about that, I know. But still, it's just exciting at least finally to start when I'm getting books from this region, and we're now seeing like different experiences that people in this part of the world do have, and it's a wonderful time. But hopefully, more and more books will come from that part of the country and that part of the world.
Absolutely, it's a place that's teeming with stories. I mean, I've been there a few times myself. My parents are from Nigeria. I was born and raised in this country, but I've been to Nigeria a number of times. And whenever I go to the north, I think there's just so much complexity in this place that is kind of eager to be captured in a story, right? To be rendered in narrative and to be shared with the world.
Exactly. I mean, there's so much so much complications. I've used the word complications a lot already, but
it's an appropriate word.
There's so much flux, so much things that are just happening. Like, and I mean, because we're talking about like Nigeria now, we're talking about a country that's made up of like 5, 6, like several many like regions, which are like 200 years ago or so, 100 years ago or so, we're like independent regions. We're just on their own. They had their own independent culture. They were doing things in their own way. But some white guys from Britain showed up and like said, "Oh, you guys have to be a country," like, and forced them to be together, and that causes so much, as I said, so much turbulence, and which produces so much wonderful like material for a writer. I mean, because it's in turbulence, it's in chaos, in human conflict and human pain that we can get to assess the human situation, right? The human condition, and that provides wonderful material for a novelist, for a writer, and which is nice, but which is also sad. I mean, it's better we don't actually write. You don't have anything to write about, right? And have a good country and have good things happening. But I mean, most times you wonder what aliens would say when they just come from space and see about, I mean, the whole colonial situation and all, like about. I don't know. I used to think about that. I used to think about aliens a lot. I mean, there's some stuff about.
I still think about aliens, Stephen. I'm obsessed. I think they're among us. No, it's. I'm reminded of that great line that Teju Cole has in his book "Every Day Is for the Thief," where he talks about the tragedy of somebody like John Updike, who has incredible amount of talent, but is part of a generation of writers who don't have as much to write about as Nigerians might have to write about. He talks about like how the challenge of being a novelist in the West is, sort of trying to animate the slow washing of dishes, right? Like the domestic scenes that predominate in the West. And there's just so much story as it happens that's, in Nigeria because of all of the stuff that we've talked about, sort of colonialism and war. And the other thing too is that I think moving beyond the kind of war frame that predominates when people think about Nigeria, they think, oh, the North is in conflict with the South. There's, political. And I think what your novel does, and the novels of the folks we've discussed as well, is saying, yes, that's certainly a factor, but humans live here. Humans who love and breathe and are deceitful and are kind and honest. And there's this overlay of, sort of political drama and struggle and colonialism. But the really interesting question is what happens when that sort of stuff interacts with human emotion. What emerges from that? So, and I think you do that so beautifully in this novel. I'm going to turn really quickly back to audience questions. Samuel Oladele says, why the name Andy Africa?
Yeah, so yeah, in the novel, so something happens very well in the novel, right? I think in the third chapter. So my narrator Andy, he makes some comments, right? Some anti-African comments, and then his math teacher, who is also his mentor, decides to like punish him by like give him the nickname and all, and it's a name he detests for a good chunk of the novel until they have later on he begins to reconsider, right? And so it just made friends also mock Andy in a way, like the kind of a play, and but whatever it's so that's where that comes from, and again to stress that's dualism, that huge theme of dualism, like in the novel, that's Africa versus the West, that's the dialectic at play, Africa versus the West, or even science versus faith, science versus art. So all this theme of duality, this motif of duality in the novel. So yeah, I mean, that is like a manifestation of it, yeah, and the Africa.
It's
Yeah.
certainly a provocative title,
Yeah.
which is great for folks who are
Yeah.
marketing it. Can I ask what and I know this is a fraught question, I'll ask it anyway, but what do you want this book to do in the world? What do you want it to do?
Whatever, I mean, I want people who read the book to perhaps have a few hours, a good, I don't know how long it takes to read the book, whatever, but for the whole period of reading the book, I mean, to have a good time reading it anyway. I mean, there's so much, I think, I mean, Andy's a fun person. His perspective on the world I think it's very interesting. And that's something I really love. I mean, his coming of age and all those complexities, all those, I mean, his views and all are very interesting. But of course, and to, again, as I said, to explore all these elements of post-colonialism in Nigeria, northern Nigeria, and all that, that I feel need to be like talked about more and more and all that. But again, I mean, once the book has been published, it's, as I said, the property of the reader, and for them to read the text however they want to, and whatever I think, whatever I think, my own personal intentions. I don't know. I don't think it has any huge bearing in the end, whatever. Yeah. So, but whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. So here you are, a Nigerian writer who is based in England. You're finishing up your PhD in creative writing in England. Is Nigeria, I think, for example, about Joyce, who leaves Ireland and writes about Ireland for the rest of his life, even though he, sort of doesn't go back to Ireland. Will you continue to write about Nigeria, or do you see yourself kind of writing about England and the experiences you had there?
I don't know. I mean, as I said, it depends on what comes to me, right? When I go to my table to write, But of course, I mean, as we just finished, as we just said it some moments ago, I mean, the whole chaos, turbulence, and the terrors of like post-colonial Nigeria, contemporary Nigeria, it presents a novelist like wonderful material. Like, I mean, why would I want to? In a way, sometimes I wonder, why would I want to write about, as you said, why would I want to animate the washing of dishes and the cleaning of things and hedges and clean streets? I mean, yeah, like there's so much to talk about, like in Nigeria. I mean, like many people who, like many Americans who have never visited countries like Nigeria, like they were not, like whenever they get the opportunity of perhaps just being in Nigeria, just when you just walk on any Nigeria street, any arbitrary street, for like 1 minute or two, you find like 500 stories to write about. I mean, there's just so much happening. You could just see, I mean, Nigerians, you just see so many things happening. You just imagine, oh, what is going on in this person's life? Like, what are they thinking? Or you just see things happening. There's always something happening anyway. And it's for a Nigerian writer, I actually would think sometimes it can be like overstimulation in a way. Like you're just besieged with so much to write about, and you wonder, oh, what do you want to begin from? Like, what would you say? I know, but you just write whatever comes to you, as I said.
Yeah. We're drawing to a close, have just a couple minutes left. So I want to ask you, again, as I'm talking with you now and as I read your book, it's obvious that you're a person who thinks deeply about art, and that you're constantly kind of interacting with art and taking in art. I was wondering if you could tell us about a piece of art that you've seen or heard that has moved or inspired you recently.
I mean, I have to think for like for a few hours, right? A number of hours or so.
Anything that comes to mind.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
I'll talk about. Let's talk about a bit about generative AI, ChatGPT, for
Oh yeah,
example,
absolutely.
or DALL-E, Bard, and all. I mean, I don't know. It raises many huge questions. Really exciting. Really, is great to talk about, right? Like about creativity, the nature of creativity, you know. Like you see what the AI, I mean, has created, like in terms of like visual art, or even in terms of I mean, songs that the AI has created, right? By just melding stuff. But let's talk a bit more about just how the AI creates sentences, you know. I mean, as writers, we writing sentences are what we do all the time, right? And it just creates you to think that, oh, like the AI, what it just does is to try to predict, it just tries to predict like the next word, like what is the next word.
Yeah.
And most times as a writer, when I sit down, I think that is what I'm usually doing, right? I'm thinking, oh, like
Yeah.
what feels like the next word, I know, like
Sure.
the next emotion, or the next thing that comes, you know, and it's very intriguing, and it raises many, as I said, many huge philosophical questions, and yeah, but I've seen some wonderful art that I think it's called Midjourney, right?
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
AI platform has created, and it's like really like I don't know. I just feel very, very stunned, and it's wonderful if you're a creative person. Like for example, like it's easier to create, um, like to create a film, right? Or to create maybe a short film from your bedroom. You can just sit down, cross your legs, and you can just create something. But I don't know. I don't know. It's just something for writers to also think like, what do these things mean, and what impact would it have on our psyches, right? On how we create and how we view the world and all that. And yeah, and I wonder, like my character Andy, like what would Andy think about that, right? I mean, I wrote the novel when before all this stuff came to the consciousness of, I mean, of the public and all. Like, yeah, but well, I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah. No, I could talk at length about AI, and I'm
Yeah.
thinking deeply about that and how it'll affect our
Yeah.
work.
Yeah.
We have 2 minutes left. Another question has just come in, so I'll ask you that, and
Yeah.
then we'll conclude.
Yeah.
What reaction? This is from John Paul Justin Aman again. What reaction have you received from friends and family in Nigeria about this book?
I mean, friends and family. I mean, the book hasn't been published in Nigeria, so I mean, I don't know exactly what they think, you know. But I mean, a number of Nigerians have read the book, and I'm very, yeah, and yeah, I'm very, very touched by the responses, right? I mean, they fully understand, like they know what it means, like what it means to be Andy, like they definitely know and what it feels to be like that. And yeah, for example, last time I was in Nigeria, I mean, that was in 2019, right? Everybody just kept telling me, please don't come back to Nigeria, please don't come back, don't come back. And I was so heartbroken by that. And that is exactly what people like Andy have been told. I mean, I mean, to leave and know and not to come back. And yeah, so I was really touched by their responses, how they strongly related to the character, and how and they were appreciative of the fact that a book like this was written. So that was really nice to hear.
Yeah. Stephen, such a pleasure talking with you. Again, I want to say congratulations to you on this tremendous accomplishment. It's wonderful that you've done this. I have no doubt this book will do really well in the world, and it's been a pleasure speaking with you, Stephen.
Well, thank you so much for this conversation, and for your wonderful questions, and for a very kind comment, you know. And yeah, and I'd like to thank the Politics and Prose bookstore for hosting this event. And yeah, thanks to everyone for joining us. And please ensure you buy a book from the bookstore, preferably my book. Yeah, so yeah, the first sorrowful mysteries of Africa. So yeah, nice talking to you, Tope. Yeah, thank you so much for this conversation. Thank you.
Hello. I first want to say thank you both for joining us today. Thank you to everybody who was watching. I know we've been battling some time zones this week, so just thank you to everyone for making the time and coordinating to be here. And we really are grateful for our viewers because we couldn't continue to host these types of events without the book sales to support them. So please make sure that you support Stephen by purchasing the 5 Sorrowful Mysteries of Andy Africa through the PNP website. And also be sure to check our website for our most current and updated event listings. We have a great list of virtual events, in-person events. A lot of those are live streamed, posted on our YouTube, so be sure to check them out. And we do hope to see you all there. Thank you again, Stephen and Tope, and thanks everybody for being here. Stay well read, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Cheers.
Bye.
Thank you.